From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I am Estefania Bravo, and this is From the South. Peru's opposition leader Keiko Fujimori has published a letter to defend her innocence after being arrested. The leader of the Popular Force and daughter of former President Alberto Fujimori says she has been arrested without any evidence. She denounced political persecution against her and her party. Keiko has been detained on money laundering charges. Keiko was detained when she went to the prosecutor's office to declare on the alleged illegal financing of her presidential campaign. The judge has reportedly ordered that she will be detained for 10 days. The prosecutor also ordered the detention of 19 others involved in the case, including 2 former ministers.
I don't have the means to comment on it right now because we don't have any additional information. I suppose we will have access to that information in the coming days. For the prosecutor and judicial branch to have made the decision, it must be because there are indications or evidence against someone to detain them. We will see about this in the coming days.
Her supporters are protesting the arrest. They have gathered in front of a police station in Lima, shouting "Freedom for Keiko." Our correspondent in Lima, Jaime Herrera, tells us more.
We are right at the place where the leader of Popular Force, Keiko Fujimori, has been arrested. In some videos circulating on social media, we can see the daughter of former President Alberto Fujimori was taken by the police. She is accused of alleged money laundering. According to the judge, there is a risk of evading justice. Along with other 19 people, she is accused of receiving illicit payments, probably from the Brazilian company Odebrecht, or even from other activities such as drug trafficking. During her campaign, she said these funds were collected from different events and donations, but the judge wants her to be detained for 10 days so police can start an investigation. During this period of time, she could be sent to preventive detention.
We thank Jaime Herrera for that report. Venezuela's Attorney General Tarek William Saab says a councilwoman who died on detention committed suicide. Authorities say Fernando Albán threw himself from a window while arrested in the Bolivarian Intelligence Service. The councilman was arrested after being linked to the failed assassination attempt against President Nicolás Maduro last August.
The fractures in the areas of his body, head, thorax and extremities are products of the fall, with 4 wounds. They showed vital reaction, which is determinant in establishing that at the moment of the impact, the victim was alive. That they drowned him, that they suffocated him, that he was already dead when he fell, are rotten lies that must not be repeated.
And family and friends of Fernando Albán have laid him to rest. A religious ceremony was held in the Central University of Venezuela chapel, where he studied for his law degree. More news now. Category 4 Hurricane Michael has made landfall in Florida by ripping through Panama City Beach and battering the region. With winds of 230 kilometers per hour, it has caused floods and uprooted trees. Over 2 million residents were giving evacuation orders, but those still in the area were told it was too late to evacuate. Michael is just short of a Category 5 hurricane.
Hurricane Michael is a deadly Category 4 storm. This is the worst storm that the Florida Panhandle has seen in more than 100 years. Again, this is the worst storm that our Florida Panhandle has seen in a century. Hurricane Michael is upon us, and now is the time to seek refuge.
Our correspondent in the U.S., Jorge Gestoso, has more.
Thank you. Hurricane Michael, a Category 4 monstrous storm with winds of 145 miles, could reach Category 5 before hitting Panama City in the few coming hours. We're talking about a surge expected of 14 feet. The Panama City beach has been closed. Half of the population of the area has left already. The winds could hit also Georgia and even the Carolinas. The governor of Florida says that it's time to go and it's time to take all the precautions because they believe that the consequences are going to be devastating. We get back to you now.
We thank Jorge Gestoso for that report. Nicaragua is still reeling from the heavy rainfall brought by Michael in recent days. 14 people were reported dead across Central America. Damage was widespread.
Floods, fallen trees, and semi-destroyed houses are what's left in the aftermath of heavy rainfall. In the Camilo Ortega neighborhood, Maria Auxiliadora lost her home and all her belongings.
Here, many neighborhoods of Nicaragua are affected. The whole country is like this, but President Daniel is helping not only me, but all the affected.
The government has begun an emergency response. In the Monteverde region, the City Hall of Managua continues to help people most in need, an initiative much appreciated by locals.
We are not at risk like before, because before we couldn't even fall asleep each time it rained. The first time, the rain even dragged big trees that we had. But with this help, we feel more safe. We can go to bed at peace. This has been a benefit for all.
In Managua, over 3,000 people were evacuated to temporary shelters.
The model that the government has, it has been tested whether it's an earthquake, flooding, fires, any type of natural disaster. It's a model that first of all puts our people as the main protagonist. A lot of training and risk disaster management, in how we deal with emergencies and with interinstitutional accompaniment.
In the capital, 24 houses were destroyed, 7 shelters are in operation. So far, more than 25,000 people have been affected and 4 were killed.
The economic cost of climate-related disasters has reached $2.25 trillion over the last 2 decades. That's a 150% increase, according to the United Nations. The UN has reported that climate change is increasing the risk of extreme natural disasters such as floods and storms. Countries where the financial loss has been the highest are India, China, the United States, and Japan.
We have seen already that there is a very sharp increase in the number of climate-related events, which are actually creating 77% of the total direct economic losses caused by disasters. The report also emphasizes on the fact that the poorest of the poor are the most affected. And this happens even in developed nations.
We really need to have some disaster risk reduction and disaster risk mitigation, that is adaptation for the short term. For 5 to 10 year period, poor people in poor countries do not have 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. Most of those children will be dead. This is what is going to happen. Either they will be dead because of the catastrophe itself, or they'll be dead because of the prevailing persistent effect of malnutrition that comes along with these catastrophes, with the droughts and the floods.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. The Alternative Revolutionary Forces of the Communist Party in Colombia has asked the public prosecutor to free Jesus Santrich. Senator Victoria Sandino says Santrich was arrested with no legal guarantees as he was accused of drug trafficking. Santrich has been accused by prosecutor Néstor Humberto Martínez, although some say he has no evidence against the FARC militant.
Santrich is the only Colombian prisoner who has been arrested without complying with the constitutional rules for this kind of procedure. He just has an Interpol order against him, violating all judicial legislations.
University students are marching throughout Colombia to protest against the budget crisis. Private universities, the Senes Workers Unions, and the National Indigenous Organization are protesting the financial situation. According to Jennifer Pedraza, a representative of the National University, the institution's budget deficit exceeds $6 million. Our correspondent in Bogotá, Paola Fernandez, has more.
Teachers and students' movements from public universities has been mobilizing to demand more resources from the national government. This is one out of 5 demonstrations that will take place across Bogotá. Students are protesting due to an extreme budget deficit in public education. They want a new budget of close to $1 million and for the government to pay the debt it has with universities, high schools, and to improve science and technology research in Colombia.
Workers' Party presidential candidate Fernando Haddad held a press conference for international media on Wednesday in Brazil. He spoke about the dangers far-right candidate Jair Bolsonaro represents for the country, particularly in economic measures and isolationism.
The financial market here prefers the extreme right candidate because of his plan to sell national equity, basically thinking of quick and short-term profits. They're looking at Petrobras, Bank of Brazil, and the Federal Savings Bank, so we have to send out an alert on the risk we're facing. I understand that the pace of integration has been very slow so far, and the world's geopolitical arrangements require faster action. I understand that Mercosur and South America depend on a plan of better and faster integration with a certain level of determination for us to be important in the world. We are weak if we're isolated.
Our correspondent in Sao Paulo, Ignacio Lemus, has more.
The presidential candidate for the Workers' Party, Fernando Haddad, has been talking to the international media at this hotel in Sao Paulo, where he was warned about another possible absence of Jair Bolsonaro from the coming TV debates, supposedly on advice from his doctors. Fernando Haddad said he was ready to go to any hospital or clinic and that he will debate very calmly so as not to put any stress on Bolsonaro. He said that the absence of Bolsonaro would be another blow to democracy, especially in a situation where the electorate is being informed by fake news on social media. Haddad also talked about the international situation, including the diplomatic tension between Brazil and Venezuela. He said Brazil needed to develop a different kind of diplomatic relationship with its neighbors. He said there needed to be collaboration with Venezuela and also with Argentina, and this was the best way of helping to promote solutions to the crisis in those countries. On Argentina, he said that in spite of ideological differences, collaboration could help to improve the economic situation there, and this would be good for Brazil too. Haddad also pointed to the dangers presented by U.S. interest in the region, with military bases and its interest in controlling Venezuela and also Brazil offshore oil reserves. Finally, Haddad emphasized his disagreements with the economic adjustments policies of President Michel Temer, which he said will be continued by Bolsonaro and his main economic advisor, Paulo Guedes. He said the voters had rejected such policies last Sunday, as seen in the very low votes for the candidates of the two governing parties, the MDB and the PSDB.
We thank Nacho Lemos for that report. Bolivia has invited Chile to hold talks on the long-running maritime border dispute.
El gobierno de Bolivia expresa su respeto.
The government of Bolivia expresses its respect for the recent discussion of the International Court of Justice in the before-mentioned case. In this context, the plurinational state of Bolivia wishes to point out the importance of the statement contained in the last paragraph number 176 of the before-mentioned ruling that states, however, the conclusion of the court should not be understood as an impediment to the parties continuing their dialogue.
In response to that, Chile's President Sebastián Piñera says he is willing to talk, but he has conditions. He says Bolivia must first withdraw its demand for access to the sea through Chilean territory.
Chile was always and will always be ready for dialogue with all countries in the world, and especially its neighboring countries. And as far as Bolivia is concerned, I think it's very important to fulfill the requirements before new talks start. It must be clear that the 1904 border agreement between Chile and Bolivia is recognized. The decision by the International Court must be recognized and respected, and Bolivia has to abandon its absurd demand for sea access into Chilean territory.
Indigenous women living in Panama's forests are creating the first bank for indigenous people. Tired of facing obstacles and discrimination in regular banks, Embera indigenous women launched the bank project in 2015 with only 22 partners. Now they offer saving accounts and loans, expecting to transform in an exclusive bank for indigenous people. People in El Salvador are marching to demand that the government investigate the murder of Monsignor Oscar Cesar Romero, who was killed while celebrating a mass some 38 years ago. Demonstrators will gather until Sunday, when Romero is expected to be canonized by Pope Francis during a special ceremony in the Vatican. Romero, a symbol of social justice, will become the country's first saint. Opposition to the tax reform in Costa Rica continues, even though the Legislative Assembly has already approved the reform during their first debate.
1 month on, workers continue to strike across the country. They have said that the strike will only end when tax reform is completely repealed.
We need to see the reform to be completely revised. If there is any constitutional flaw in it, it can't get through the Assembly. If the reform passes during the second debate, we will take it to the streets.
Protesters consider it a win that the reform was only approved with 35 votes in favor, with 22 assembly members voting against it.
When we started this strike, only one lawmaker was supporting us. We ended up with over 22. That tells us our protests have reached the Legislative Assembly.
But some labor unions have already pulled out of the strike after the reform was approved during the first debate in the Assembly.
Healthcare unions are going back to work today. However, other sectors are still in strike. In the education sector, we keep fighting. Our movement remains strong.
Labor unions from over 15 public institutions have received affidavits saying their strike is illegal, including the Ministry of Public Education.
Throughout the years, most strikes in Costa Rica have been declared illegal. We are used to it, but people are strong enough to keep protesting despite that.
The country's judiciary has 30 days to approve the reform or deem it unconstitutional.
Cuba is celebrating the 150th anniversary of the start of its war for independence from Spanish colonial rule. Let's find out more about this date on this special report.
La de Majagua, located in the east of Cuba, was the scenario where the first cry for independence was heard. On October 10, 1868, Carlos Manuel de Céspedes released his slaves and called them to take arms and emancipate Cuba from the Spanish Empire. Before the newly free men, Céspedes read the manifesto of October 10, in which he proclaimed the abolition of slavery and expressed the reasons why Cubans had to also abolish Spanish colonialism. The war started in 1868 and it lasted for 10 years. Despite its eventual failure, it served to awaken patriotic sentiments among Cubans. The 10-year war was followed by the Chiquita War of 1879 to 1880 and by the War of Independence of 1895 to 1898. This last one was headed by José Martí, the national hero of Cuba. The people of the island had to fight for almost a century to obtain their final liberation, the one that came at the hands of Fidel Castro and the rebels that on January 1, 1959, ousted Fulgencio Batista. The triumph of the revolution, as Fidel confirmed, had its roots on October 10, 1868, when Carlos Manuel de Céspedes, the father of the nation, called for a rebellion that marked the beginning of Cuba's struggle for independence.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Containing 75 bodies has been found near the former jihadi stronghold of Sirte in western Libya. The municipal council spokesman said the mass grave was uncovered in an agricultural area. Jihadis took advantage after the NATO-backed overthrew and killed longtime leader Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. They established footholds in several parts of the country. Mozambique's Renamo opposition party says the incumbent party Frelimo did not conduct fair local elections. They say police force was used to keep people away from polling stations. Renamo spokesman Andre Magivire also alleged ballot box stuffing in the central Zambeza province. The results are due to be announced on Thursday.
The situation is serious. The police are fighting on our candidates. The voting points are out of control. People are showing up with 10 ballot cards, and it's total chaos.
A 6.0 magnitude earthquake has hit off the coast of Indonesia's Java and Bali Islands. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, the epicenter was registered in the Bali Sea, around 40 kilometers off the eastern end of Java. There are reports that it was felt in parts of Bali, although there are no details of casualties or damage. Indonesia is still reeling from a devastating 7.5 magnitude earthquake and tsunami that killed at least 2,000 people. Heavy rains and flash floods have killed at least 10 people on the island of Mallorca in Spain. Rivers burst their banks, flooding streets and homes. Roads have also been destroyed. With people left trapped in their homes, one person is still missing.
I want to show my solidarity and empathy to the families of the victims who have suffered an enormous loss. And I want to reassure the population that the Spanish government will put into action all the necessary resources so they can go back to their normal lives.
Our correspondent in Spain, Edu Marin, tells us more.
At least 10 people have died due to torrential rain and flash flooding on Mallorca Island. Reliable sources say up to 9 people remain unaccounted for. It's feared the death toll may rise as emergency services continue the search and rescue efforts. 400 emergency personnel have arrived on the island to render assistance. President Pedro Sanchez has visited affected areas. So too has the opposition leader, Pablo Casado. The village of St. Lorenz was among those areas hardest hit. A river overflowed, causing widespread damage. There are images of cars being swept away by raging floodwaters as flows were transformed into virtual waterways. Spain's Met Service had issued a red alert, which is its highest level of warning for extreme risk. However, it has since lowered the warning to yellow. A reduction in rainfall is expected in the coming hours.
We thank Edu for that report, and now it's time to bring you some other stories from around the world.
Russia's President Vladimir Putin has personally congratulated Khabib Nurmagomedov for retaining his UFC lightweight title against Conor McGregor. Last Saturday's intense match was preceded by hostile exchanges, including racist and Islamophobic abuse hurled at Nurmagomedov. After his victory, the fight continued with the Russian lightweight jumping over the cage to attack a member of McGregor's team, which led to a brawl.
Unlike his performance and disrespect to my side, my parents, my country, I behaved with dignity. But I also lost control at certain moments because provocations continued even during the fight.
One worker has been killed and 10 others injured in an explosion at an oil refinery in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Firefighters responded immediately while local residents fled the town in panic when smoke sprayed. One said the explosion was so powerful that it rocked the family home. The cause is not known yet. A crucifix that was erected on the Greek island of Lesbos in honor of refugees who died at sea was vandalized on Sunday. Not everyone was in favor of the crucifix. One local organization said it was divisive. Locals, however, are outraged by the vandalism, saying they believe it was motivated by hate. Rocks were used to put it back up, and residents say a larger cross should be put in its place.
U.S. President Donald Trump says he has talked to Saudi authorities about missing journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Addressing reporters at the White House, Trump said he demanded answers from high-level officials about his disappearance. The missing Washington Post contributor is also a U.S. resident. He seemingly vanished at the beginning of October after entering the Saudi consulate in Istanbul.
I'd rather not say, but at a very high level, the highest level. Let me say this, it's the highest level, okay?
A stolen ancient Persian artifact has returned to Iran. The 25-centuries-old piece is in Tehran's National Museum after a court in the U.S. ordered its return. The bas-relief depicts the head of a soldier from a line of immortal guards. The twice-stolen artifact was discovered in the early 1930s at Persepolis, today's central Iranian city of Shiraz. And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And also join us on social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Stefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.
Brazilian citizens casted their vote in general elections. Telesul was there to bring you all the most important and immediate information